Monday morning edition of Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Johnny Mac, Jody Mac here with you. We've got a special guest, former Eagles coach, game management assistant, right-hand man to Doug Pederson the last couple of years. Ryan Paganetti joins us here on Birds 365. Coach, Jody Mac and Johnny Mac here. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Thrilled to have you, Ryan. I do want to start because obviously you were the guy in Doug Pederson's ear. But for people who don't know, Ryan was also the assistant linebackers coach as well. So you kind of had your foot in both camps when you talk about personnel, when you talk about coaching that part of it, and also the analytics. The Eagles led the NFL in the Doug Pederson era when it came to fourth down conversions, when it came to 2-point tries, when it came to going for it more than anybody else. So what was it like sort of straddling that line? Because you always hear, you got the football guys, you got the numbers guys, you kind of straddled it.
So for me personally, like I felt like it was really sort of a positive in terms of like getting buy-in with data from, the coaching side, because they had somebody that was sort of with them all the time that was like fairly familiar with the analytics side and the data, because I think sometimes you can get certain like groups, like your analytics people and your coaches, maybe they're not on the same page just because they have such unique backgrounds that don't really intersect. So I felt like the fact that I had a little bit of experience in both of those was sort of useful to getting like buy-in from the coaching side of things.
So, all right, tell us the truth. Doug Pederson, during his time as Eagles head coach, was certainly famous. Some would say infamous. I'll say famous because I thought he was successful at it for going for it on fourth down. How much of that was Doug's bravado and or the analytics that you provided to him that said, Coach, this would be a good idea to go for it on fourth down?
I would say at the end of the day, it was his decision every single time. But the great thing was that he was so receptive and open to ideas. And like at the very least, like he wanted to consider what the data said in a certain scenario. So whether or not he was going to follow it, like he wanted to know what it said. And I'd say of any NFL coach that I've interacted with, like he was more receptive to the analytics, particularly with the 4th and 1s, 4th and 2s, 2-point conversions. Like I've never, interacted with anybody that was as receptive as him. And, he really sort of developed the confidence, particularly in 2017, that like the 4th downs and the 2-point conversions, some of these other things were helping. And, once we were kind of rolling and we got a pretty good win streak, like he just kind of stuck with it. And, we had a ton of success with that.
It's interesting, Ryan, because Frank Wright was nice enough to give me a few minutes after the Super Bowl. And while everybody else was talking about the Philly special or Zach Ertz's touchdown, he was talking about the 4th and 1. He was talking about Nick Foles sliding, Zach Ertz making the last-minute move, the conversion there. And he says, if we don't make that, the game's over. That was his mind. That was his mentality, because it was a shootout game. He was thinking, okay, if we don't make this, the Patriots are going to go down the field and score. You talk about receptiveness. Did guys around the league, when the Eagles started to have success with this, did they contact you saying, how do I get my guy, my coach, to listen to this kind of stuff, to put pressure on the opponent?
So, first of all, in that scenario you're talking about with Frank, that was sort of an interesting scenario for me. And I was sort of like grateful that we didn't end up in a more complicated situation there. But for the most part, I was usually communicating either on like 2nd or 3rd down, like, okay, if we're presented with these situations, here's where the analytics would say like strongly go for it. Here's where it's like more of a toss up. Here's where the analytics might say punt. But at that stage of the game in the Super Bowl, it was like 3rd and 1 from our own 45-yard line. And I was sort of communicating with Coach Pederson, like, look, if we have a sack or a significant lost yardage play, the Patriots have not punted the entire game. These guys have like 550 yards. And so from an analytics standpoint, the 4th and 1 from the -45 is like a very strong go for it situation. But I was very concerned of like, at what threshold would we have decided to punt there versus go for it? And like, I think we probably settled somewhere around like 4th and 5, 4th and 6. But if we had gone for say 4th and 6 from our own 40, down by 1 with 6 minutes left in the 4th quarter, like that would have been maybe the most controversial 4th down we had ever done. So I was like thankful that we didn't lose yards there. I'm like, oh man, that's great. But Yeah, I know. Particularly when Frank went to the Colts, like I talked with some of the guys there, and like we sort of interacted on like things that we had some success here, and maybe that they could adopt there. And I think Frank really is sort of using like a similar model to what we were doing with the Eagles, and like he's obviously having a ton of success there, particularly with like sort of an unsettled quarterback situation the last couple of years. But I think more and more I've sort of interacted with different team employees and are like, look, like, do you have any ideas? And for me, I was sort of lucky that Coach Pederson was, a new head coach. And I think because of that, he was sort of like not stuck in his way of doing things. And some of these head coaches that maybe have like been around the league for 15, 20 years as a head coach, like, and they've won a lot of games, like they're, in my opinion, a lot less receptive to, some new data or new ideas because they sort of have like a structure and an idea that has worked for them already. But, since Coach Pederson was just starting out, he was a lot more open to it.
All right, Ryan. So let me ask you this. You use analytics to review what has transpired previously to make a decision that's going to come in the future, sometime in a matter of seconds when it comes to play calling, some of that stuff. It's immediate. It's got to be immediate. How much can you use analytics looking back and deciding what went wrong, what didn't work out, what should have been your focus rather than what turned into being your focus? It all kind of comes together as I ask you, what happened last year with 4-11-1? Where did the season go wrong?
So I think in general, just kind of like what I jumped on right before, right before I started talking, I heard you guys talking about like adjustments with like, Joe Montana or Nick Mullins or Minshew and the statistical, information that they had. And I think it's really important to try to like consider like how different the league has become over time and sort of being like, okay, if I'm going to study NFL history or I'm going to study something to make a decision in 2020, like I can't really use, snaps from 1998 or even snaps from 2005 or like trying to find some kind of sample of plays to work off of that you feel like is most closely similar to the current NFL. And at the end of the day, like all of these decisions, if you're using analytics, like there's going to be a probability associated with them. For example, I think around the NFL, 4th and 1s might convert 65% of the time, over the last 5 years or over the last 10 years or so. But at the end of the day, that means that, if you go for it 12, 15 times on the course of a season on 4th and 1, like you could convert 12 of them, you could convert 3 of them. Like there's like a range of how things work out. And then ultimately like the process behind it, like we wanted to kind of have a mindset that like, over the long haul, like these ideas would work out more often than not. I don't want to get too much in the details of last year, why things didn't exactly work. I think the simplest answer is if you look at like the team's, statistical performance, the pass game dropped off so significantly. And I think we were near the bottom of the league in like offensive passing production. And at the end of the day, like you look at the list of teams, in recent history that have really struggled passing, and the majority of them end up with losing records. So I think, for the Eagles in particular, like there's an emphasis this year to like really get the pass game back on track. And I think, they've got some, talented players and the offensive line's coming back. And I think in particular, people sort of underestimate how challenging that offensive line situation was last year, because I think we had like 13 or 14 offensive line combinations. In some cases, it would be like 3rd and 4th string players playing. And, that's challenging, like particularly for a quarterback or a play caller, when you're like worried that, maybe a guard or a tackle might get beaten like instantly off the snap, or you have to keep more guys in the protection, and then your pass game's like less lethal. And there's a lot of variables there, but it seems like, the offensive line looks healthy, and they that should be a significant boost, for the run and pass game this year.
And that's the key to it all, isn't it, Ryan? The variables, because we talk about, you can go on social media. You could tell Jody and I with the gray beards, obviously we're much older than you. So, we're the old school guys. So we're the kind of guys you're trying to convince. You go on social media, any coach has a 4th and 2, say minus 45, as you were saying. Everybody kills them if they don't go for it. In the modern, you see it all the time. Oh, you got to go for this. You got to go for this. Now, the Eagles obviously are most receptive. If you look around the league, it was very successful when the personnel was great and clicking on all cylinders. Less successful when you had the replacement players. So how do you factor in those variables immediately? You got 40 seconds to make a decision.
So I think, at the end of the day, that's really where, the head coach's evaluation or, the position coach's evaluations are really critical to like them making an assessment, because it is just really just so hard with so many individual variables of individual players to like make, a statement. Like I can't say like, okay, because this left guard's in there and because the quarterback's at this level, like our conversion rate went from 62% to 57.2%. Like that's a little bit too complicated at this time. And I think that's really where the coach's instinct and feel for the game sort of factors in, and like they can make a decision that's really probably more legitimate than what an analytics person could do. I can sort of give them like a baseline of like, all right, here's in like a typical situation or an average situation, but using your expertise, like you ultimately can kind of like tilt that number directionally, like up or down based on how you feel about the team.
Ryan, let me ask you to take off your game management hat and put on your linebacker assistant hat from the last couple of years. When did you think, man, we might have something special with this Singleton kid? Kind of came out of nowhere, CFL, didn't reach the NFL the way most young linebackers do. When did he pop for you guys that we might have found a diamond in the rough?
So I think the first year he was here, it was definitely like more of like a learning experience. Like we had a lot of players that were veterans in Coach Schwartz's defense, and from the scheme standpoint, maybe it was like a guy in their third or fourth year in the same defense. Like, so he was a little bit behind, not mentally, but just like those guys were basically like graduate experts in the scheme. So it was a little bit of like a process for him to, catch up with those guys. But the second season, this 2020 off season, like one of the things that I was doing is I was sort of tracking, as many stats from practice on a daily basis, and then like adjusting per like how many reps each guy got in practice. So like, say for example, like Davion Taylor played X amount of snaps in practice, and then like this was his production, and like adjusting on like a per play basis, or TJ Edwards or whoever. But we had this like chart in our linebacker room, and it showed, like here's everyone's production on a per play basis. And I'd go back and watch the film every day, and Alex Singleton would have so many tackles that all the other players thought I was cheating. We had some like side deal where he was crazy. No, I'm telling you, like he somehow is like has double the tackles of everybody else on a per play basis every day. And that really like perked my interest up. He even had a lot of TFLs, and he just was always around the ball, and he wasn't making mental errors, and it was exciting. And I think, he still was a little bit behind on the depth chart. And then there were some things that changed, I think maybe week 4 or 5 last year. And he gets in there, and from like a per play basis and a per game basis, he was right near the top of the league in tackles per game. And he did a great job for us. And, I'm really happy for him, just like in terms of the challenging situation that he's been in. I mean, most of those guys that are like spending a few years in the CFL, they don't get another NFL opportunity. And, he's grinded every single day and, continue to fight for his like dream. And I'm at this point, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he has 150 tackles this year.
Yeah, he's a very instinctive player. I remember Ken Blajol, the first time he told me about Alex, he said when the pads come on, he's going to show up. So to me, he kind of knew it a little bit early. Mm-hmm. Last one for me, Ryan, because I know you got to run. Thrilled to have you. Ryan Paganetti, Doug Pederson's sort of eye in the sky, in his ear when it talked about the big decisions. This is probably the most difficult time for the NFL football coach. You get near cut down day. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, you're not the head coach or anything of that nature, but last year was the pandemic, but you had been quality control, assistant linebackers. You get to know these guys when they're here from the spring, moving forward. You're trying to help them. How difficult is cut down day from a coach's perspective?
I think it's really hard, particularly, when you develop these connections with guys and, like a lot of these players, like this is their dream. Like this is like everything they ever wanted in life. And not only is it their dream, but from like a financial perspective, I mean, it's life-changing amount of money, even if you can be on the roster for a couple games. And even at this point, I would always be like pushing for like our linebackers that were in camp, like let's get them on the practice squad, because those guys make, I believe, like $9,000 a week too, yeah. Which is, a whole lot more money than these guys are going to get doing other jobs. And, I just think it's just a tough feeling for everybody. Like I wouldn't even want to be there, to be honest, like as 20, 30 guys' dreams are getting ruined. Like it just, the vibe in the building is like just not good. And it's like depressing. But at the end of the day, a lot of these guys, keep grinding, and maybe there's injuries that come up around the league, or they get tryouts and, things work out. But I mean, there's been guys that have been cut, even on this cut down weekend or whatever they're doing, cut down on Tuesday, and then they go on and they get on it with another team, and, they end up having great careers. So I think that, just continuing to grind and being optimistic as a player is like important, because you never really know what's going to happen.
Ryan, last one from me. Your brother's still part of the Eagles coaching staff, TJ offensive quality coordinator. The Eagles made decision, parted with Doug Pederson, didn't retain your services, but kept your brother around. When you get him on the phone, when you get him in person for a Sunday dinner or something like that, do you specifically talk only Eagles or no Eagles whatsoever, or whatever blend in the middle? What's it like when you and your brother are getting together these days?
We talk a little bit about Eagles, but, I'm not really going to get into too many details here at this time. But we talk about a lot of stuff, and, I'm really proud of him because, like, he's been there with a few different staffs, and, pretty much every coaching staff he's been with, they've wanted to keep him around and thought he's done a great job. And, I really do hope for the Eagles' sake and Coach Sirianni and for my brother. Like, I hope the team does a great job this year. And I know I'm sure that you guys will be on Twitter or on this radio station taking shots at every decision that you make and everything, because that's just how it works. But, I hope that those guys do a great job, and, we'll see what happens.
Ryan, great stuff. We appreciate you coming on. If you land something, tell us. We get you on and give you your props for getting a new gig. Thanks for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Ryan Paganetti, former Eagles game management coach, assistant linebacker coach, good dude. Yeah, he was the guy that Doug Pederson leaned on to give him some advice during the last several years, including that Super Bowl win back in 2017 as J-Mac took him for a walk down memory lane, a good walk at that. All right, McDonald and McMullen, your Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. Still got plenty to do. Talk about the Eagles cuts they made, the trade they made, the cuts they may make today before practice. We'll get all that in before Barrett Brooks joins us in hour number 2. Keep it right here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.